Good morning, everyone. Great to see you all here today, all masked properly, which is a wonderful sight. Appreciate it very much. I want to thank you for joining us for Executive Insights. This is our signature speaker series here at the Smeal College of Business. My name is Chuck Whiteman. I'm the Dean of Smeal. We're pleased today to welcome JT Marino, the co-founder of Tuft Needle and the Chief Disruption Officer of Serta Simmons Bedding. Isn't that a great title? JT and his business partner grew Tuft Needle from $1 million in their first full year of business to more than $200 million in annual revenue in less than 6 years. In 2018, Tuft Needle merged, make note of that term, merged with Serta Simmons Bedding. Serta Simmons is one of the largest bedding manufacturers in North America, employing more than 5,000 people across North America among 27 manufacturing plants. JT studied computer science and mathematics at Penn State. I'm excited to bring you into a conversation with him about his insights on entrepreneurship and leadership. If you have a question, please submit it via our website that's on the screen there. Students who need to verify attendance can scan a QR code on the screen behind us or on the way out that's posted by the doors. The same QR code will be available for those viewing online. Please join me in welcoming JT to Executive Insights. So to get us started, JT, will you tell us something about your current role at Serta Simmons?
Sure. Can you hear me okay? Yep. It's a little strange, the role, because it was sort of invented to solve a problem that they have, which is, I would probably describe it best as like entrepreneurialism. So typically Serta Simmons has been a manufacturing sort of brand that is reselling to retailers, and so they've had to evolve to becoming a more like consumer-facing marketing company, product development company, and so I've been tasked to help them do that. They've had a few failed attempts in the past. And so essentially, if I were to simplify it is to do what we've done with Tuft Needle internally with their current brands, amongst a team of people that are traditionally experienced with manufacturing or sort of indirect consumer CPG.
So it sounds like your role fits with how we think about our major in entrepreneurship, which is corporate innovation and entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you're being tasked with the corporate innovation piece of it.
Yes, exactly.
And what do you think that you bring to this effort that is new and maybe has a better chance of success than what they were doing before?
I would say of the things, and it's not just myself, it's also definitely the team that has come along with me, is really helping to educate the point of view of the consumer. So really understanding the customer's journey, because what's happening is these brands are being disrupted by these other direct brands, these like emerging startups. And I mean, you see this with like Warby Parker, and there's so many more. There's like a D2C, direct-to-consumer business now in just about every market. And these traditional sort of manufacturing brands have really no competency internally to understand what does my customer really want. Their primary customer are retailers. And there's a translation that's lost when it comes to developing their product line. So to give you an example, Serta Simmons had somewhere around 6,000 SKUs. Tuft Needle, when we did the merger, was estimated somewhere around 15% of their revenue as far as size. And we have other competitors that are now even much larger than that. And so we did that with 1 SKU. And so when you think about, and it's interesting because that particular business model developed organically. So it doesn't seem to make sense through the lens of how business is like evolving today. But if you look into the past, it makes sense in how it was done. One of Serta Simmons' key strengths is managing complexity at scale. So that's why I was having a conversation with Sean this morning. They have all these, in hospitality, all these different hotels have their own unique mattresses that are white labeled. And there's a reason why Serta Simmons can do that. And that's one of their strengths, is to having thousands of SKUs and to be able to scale that up internationally. So, but the challenge here is you've got customers who are seeking a level of, they're seeking an experience. They're essentially, I would say that Amazon and Apple and the like are actually the true competitor to Serta Simmons, because those companies are setting a bar in a different market, but they're setting expectations. Like if you're going to buy a mattress, is it going to get to me in 2 days or faster? Or if I buy a product, how does it unbox? How does it, like, what is the shipping like? What is the customer service like? And so there's this white space emerging that people, of an expectation that people have across other markets, that they're being educated and sort of, it's being led by a lot of the technology companies. And so this white space has really created a need for evolution with the traditional brands. And so it's not just the mattress industry. That was just the one that we stumbled upon. So,
Well, let's talk about stumbling. Your story of entrepreneurial success is really quite amazing. It has its roots here at Penn State. So why mattresses? How did that come about? And can you tell us a little bit of the story of developing this idea and taking it from nowhere to hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue?
Sure. Well, like when I called my mom to tell her what I was doing, I was in Silicon Valley working at a software startup, and I told her that I was going to start a mattress company. She ended up getting my dad on the line, and she's like, could you maybe at least stick to software? And I'm like, my dad's like, if he's probably on to something, let's just see. And I'm like, my mom is one of our biggest fans, but I wanted to say, like, it is strange that I'm in the mattress industry, and I am also, I would say that I have very passionately loathed the mattress industry and still do. So I am looking forward to, at some point, escaping the market. But yeah, so really fast, I was in the College of Engineering here. I ended up, a professor introduced me to Liz Kissenweather in the College of Engineering and the E minor. That led to me meeting my co-founder and best friend, Dahi Park. He was in the school of ISD. And our relationship it really blossomed once we had met. He had a little startup that he was building. I had one of my own. I was teaching him how to write software and design. And then that's really were my technical skills. And then he was teaching me about marketing. That led to both of us sort of went on our own journeys for a couple years. And I ended up in Silicon Valley and then helping several startups build their products and hire their teams. And the last company before starting Tuft Needle, Dahi actually ended up joining me to help them do. And we were sort of like shaking and baking between the two of us. We had a skill set that was really conducive to our ability to actually start something without the need of hiring any additional talent. So we had decided, it was actually a walk. I pitched him on maybe leaving the startup we were helping and taking a shot of our own. And so it didn't take any convincing, honestly, because he cut me off and said, I'm in. And that was in Palo Alto. That was in 2012, early 2012. And basing on some of my past experience and his past experience, we didn't know what the idea would be, but we listed out a few rules, sort of like we called it the rules of the game. So whatever we end up doing or pursuing had to abide by a set of rules. And the rules were really sort of to help create constraints to guide our decision making. And so to give you an example, the first one was whatever it is that we will start has to solve a problem that we've personally had experience with. So that was one of them. The second one was we didn't want any investors. We also didn't want an exit strategy. Our minimum goal was to become financially independent, so to provide us a paycheck. Our maximum goal was to disrupt something big, if we could. So anyways, and there was others, but we used that as the framework to guide our decision-making process as to what we were going to start. We did a retrospective for a couple of weeks, which started off really slow and challenging, but it ended up turning into, we ended up with 2 large lists of problems that we had both experienced, and we selected 5. One of them that was on my list was shopping for a mattress, and it was the least sexy and the least interesting, and because of that was strangely eccentric. And it was like sort of like the joke that we would laugh about when we'd get together, like, well, we'd never do that one, but that'd be funny if we did. So, but we decided that, well, let's just see, because he had also had some pain shopping for a mattress. I was honestly burnt out of the software industry, and so I was looking for something that maybe we could have a competitive advantage by leveraging what we've learned from the technology industry and going into something new. So anyways, it seemed to like sort of check a lot of boxes for us, even though it wasn't really something we had a lot of interest in doing. So what we did was we formulated a test. So we bootstrapped Tuft Needle. So we did not raise any capital. We did not take any loans. Neither him nor myself are financially wealthy at the time. So we just had savings to pay bills, and we both had roughly about 6 months to do that. So we knew that we didn't want investors, and so the typical VC life cycle, and starting with like the pitch, and then raising capital, building your initial team, building the product, launching to see if it works or not, was not going to be compatible with our current constraints. So in order to save time, what we did was we spent actually a lot of time, a few days, thinking about how we would test each one to validate, and our goal was to have somebody put money in our hand. So as an example, one of the concepts was a B2B business product. We built a pitch deck, and we didn't say that we didn't have the product. And I'm not going to say the company, but we met with a very large retailer, and we pitched this product as if we had built it. And they were interested in doing a trial test for 4 months. And so unfortunately, that amount of time, we would have had to get jobs to like support ourselves. But that was an example of, okay, that checked the box. It gives us some level of comfort and validation that there may be product market fit. So Tuft Needle started off as literally a website. Our process we used was, we called the hate list. So we took a piece of paper, write hate list at the top, and list out everything that we hate. I mean, that's a strong word, but I found that having like emotionally sharp words and really like striking like emotional chords actually helps the creative process, at least for me. So what is it that we hate about shopping for mattresses? What is it that we hate about mattresses? And so we leveraged this lens to analyze the previous experiences we had. So what is the problem here, and breaking it out, like, well, there's too many options. If you go shopping to a store, you lay on 3 mattresses. By the time you're on your 4th, you forget what the first one was like. Do you like firm or soft or medium? Relative to what? I have no idea. I don't even know if I sleep on a medium or a firm or whatever. Like, salespeople use tricks and games to try to like get you to transact before you leave, and on and on and on. And so I ended up buying a mattress, spending a lot of money, tried to return it, had to pay restocking fees, had somebody have to inspect it, even though I had only had it for a few months, and so on. There's just a lot of things. And so we built this list, and honestly, this wasn't rocket science. Line down the center and what we would do instead. So instead of having lots of options, we would have one. Instead of firm, medium, soft, whatever, we would have one firmness, and we don't even really say what the firmness is. It is a firmness that works for most people. It was just a hypothesis. You don't have to go into a retail store to confront a salesperson. And the salespeople we do have are not salespeople, they're guides. It's customer service. There's no incentive for them to close the deal, which has its issues as far as like profitability, but we worked our way around it. So when we took this list of features, was for the antithesis to the hate list, and we circled what we felt in our gut was the least and easiest amount that we would need to offer as a feature to convince somebody to buy a mattress sight unseen and from a brand they've never heard of. And then we converted those 6 or 7 bullet points into a sales page. We purchased a photo stock image of a mattress, like literally photo stock. We didn't have a product. This is like our thing. So photo stock image of a mattress, the sales page. We built a credit card form at the bottom so it would authorize but not capture the funds. So if somebody typed in their credit card information, it wouldn't charge them, but it would trigger the system and notify us if somebody was attempting to buy. And so in June of 2012, my responsibility was product and digital design and all of that, and Dahi's was marketing. And so I launched the site, and I was sitting at Coupa Cafe in Palo Alto at one of the tables right in the front. It was like 8 o'clock at night, the cafe was like full. Every seat was taken. There was a long line. And this cafe is like famous because a lot of entrepreneurs have worked there. And so I would go there hoping like something like that would rub off on me. So Dehi wasn't with me, but I messaged him that I was sitting in the front window seat, and I messaged him that the site was up, and then he messaged me a few minutes later that the ad was up. So he took out a Google ad. About 15 minutes later, my phone was ringing, and Dehi was screaming over the phone. And I'm like, I can't hear you. What are you saying? When he's saying, he's like, we just made a sale. And so somebody had attempted to buy. And I like very knee-jerk emotionally reacted in a way I've never done before, where I like jumped out of my seat so fast that the back of my knees hit my chair and slid it. And I yelled, which I've never done before or since, I yelled jackpot really loud. And like this cafe that was like buzzing, it was like busy, there's music playing, like literally froze. And I was like in shock, and I was like also surprised like what was happening. And my mouth was like hanging open. You can't see me with my mask on. My mouth was like open. And there was a few people like nodding as if they knew exactly what it was that just happened. So that was in June. And we shut that site down that night. And then, so that was enough validation for us that like this wasn't really all that risky, that if we could convince somebody to put money in our hands, which is a sign that customers reward you with their dollars. So this is a sign that we're onto something. And so that was really in the running. And so it ended up going to 3 ideas, and then we ended up focusing on Tuft Needle. And so over that summer, I had to figure out, how does supply chain work? How do tangible goods work? How are mattresses manufactured? We didn't even know the unit economics. But one thing I could tell you is the more that we investigated, the more we realized how bad the problem was. So it got worse and worse. And the passion was like, oh my God, like this is a serious issue. This is prolific. And by October of 2012, we officially launched Tuft Needle. We opened up a business account with $6,000. We each put in $3,000 just to open the account so we could like sign up for a Google ad account and all that. And there was a number of clever things we did so that we could stay bootstrapped. But that was a constraint. And so we had to pinch every penny, which is very different than what I had experienced with startups in the past, where you're buying your customers at a loss. So we had to earn them. So we launched in October of 2012. It was just Dehi and I through 2013. We ended up hiring our brothers and a couple other people. We did $1 million in sales in 2013. 2014 was $9 million, and that's when our first lookalike company launched. We had turned down a lot of venture capital once they realized this was a space they wanted to play in. We were the only company doing it. So we figured out the model. We architected the business model. And then as we were turning down VC money, with some of the funds having decided this was a space they wanted to invest, they would find entrepreneurs to spur competition, which at first I was very uncomfortable. But as I learned more about business, I realized how important that ecosystem of competition is for our own success. So it was a blessing in disguise. And so in 2015, we did 40 million and had about 40 people, and then it was like 100 million. And by the time we did the merger in 2018, which seems very counterintuitive as to why we did this merger, but it makes a lot of sense if we talk about the mission of our company, which was to make the industry customer first. That was it. And it didn't necessarily have to be our brand, but we wanted to fix the problem. And it didn't have to be like we were the ones that did it completely. Even if we were to cause a trend and a change, it would still constitute as a success. So anyways, there was a number of reasons why we did this merger, which we can talk about. But we had an annual revenue run rate of 250 million profitable when we did the merger in 2018. And since Tuft Needle's has not received any funding and has continued to outpace most of these other brands, and also of course Serta Simmons, Beauty Rest, those brands. And I can't say the numbers, but we're knocking on the door of some big numbers. And at the current rate, I could see Tuft Needle being one of the leading brands probably within the next 5 years.
Well, there's a lot in your answer that I want to
Sorry.
I want to make sure I unpack. So merger is one of them. I think I heard you say that one of your original rules was no exit strategy.
No exit strategy.
Okay, I want to pick up on that one as well.
Sure.
So let's start with that one. Maybe you could elaborate on why that was important to you. We spent a little bit of time thinking about how we would measure success.
So as a co-founders, it's like a marriage and sort of getting on the same page with what we both want. And one of the things that we had in common that we both wanted was to be financially independent from needing jobs. At some point, being able to explore ideas and not needing to answer to somebody, to having some more personal freedom to explore ideas and concepts. So we knew so that was also an interest that we both had. So our minimum was to build a business that would, at the very least, provide a paycheck to be what we call, it's commonly called ramen profitable. So it's enough money that you can pay your bills and eat ramen, which we did. We actually achieved by December of 2012.
I'm sorry, ramen?
Ramen?
Okay.
Ramen noodles?
Yeah, all right. That's not a very high bar, right?
But it may not be I think it is because, to not have a boss and to be able to call your own shots and to structure your lifestyle and your day the way you want and not have to worry about I don't totally ascribe to this idea that entrepreneurs are big risk takers. I actually view Dehi as quite the opposite. And I view that entrepreneurialism as a way of de-risking your life because you have more control over your destiny. And so at the very least, if we were to make a positive step forward, being able to be our own bosses, to having control over how our time is used. And we both had confidence that if we could get to ramen profitable, we may be able to scale it to the next level, which may be actual legitimate, substantial salaries. So we could, eventually buy a house or something like that. So that was the minimum, because it always seems that writing out what your maximum is sort of unlimited. $1 billion company then. But the minimum's easier to describe based off of what do we really at the very least want in our lives? So it was good to get on the same page as co-founders there. But as far as do we want to sell this thing? Do we want to take it public? Well, it's sort of weird to think about that. It's sort of, I think entrepreneurialism is partly is important to be a little bit ego-driven. So you sort of have to have very confident in yourselves. But I feel like jumping to the gun that we will IPO or sell or something like that was a little bit early for us. It felt a little uncomfortable making up our minds in which way we wanted to go. So we were really wanting to focus on building a really good business. And our default was to build a family-run business and keeping it in our families. And then if we build a really good business, those options would present themselves to us, whatever they would be. But we didn't start our company with the anticipation that we were going to sell it and make a lot of money.
It sounds like it was we're not going to decide this now kind of rule.
Right, exactly.
So we're going to defer it till later and we'll know more when that occasion arises.
Yeah,
sort of
and
thing.
I think it was a little bit of paralysis through analysis. We didn't really know what we wanted. But the things we did know we wanted, that's what we used as our constraints to make some of these decisions. And so this was one that we tabled for later. But we knew that whatever it would be as far as an exit, if we were going to exit, there are certain fundamentals to the business that needed to be right to create value. And we didn't have investors, so as far as maximizing our value was really just the value of what we as co-founders owned and our employees. We ended up sharing a lot of the ownership with our employees. So it was really that, but we didn't want to use the value of the company as the primary decision-making factor with how we decided what we were doing. We also wanted to build a company that solved the problems for the consumer. And I think that gave us an edge because we were making a lot of decisions that were maybe weren't short-term wins that you might see a VC or a private equity firm preferring. And we were making decisions that were more long-term minded. And we had the patience to see how that translated. And some of those decisions had very serious downwind effects on our value. So I think then becoming something that was very intriguing and exciting to a venture capitalist or a private equity firm or a competitor or a strategic partner.
I've often heard executives and successful entrepreneurs talk about the importance of being able to make their own decisions internally, not driven by, let's say, shareholders clamoring for short-term returns, sort of thing. It sounds like you got the same thing going in your business.
Yeah, and I think it's Tuft Needle is a really it's a really different example where it's a fast-growing startup hockey stick without funding, and I think it's not just. And I'm not going to attribute that to like brilliance. I think there was a lot of timing involved, and a really good team that we had put together. But I just feel that some of the decisions that we had made, long-term minded, were critical to our success in maintaining differentiation once all these highly funded startups started. So there were some things that we could do that they couldn't because they were constrained by these short-term needs of generating value so that they could raise another round or whatever it was. But that wasn't always true because some of the decisions we made actually didn't end up panning out into value. But either way, I view it as a net win. It worked for us. And I'm talking in generalities, which I don't know is really helpful, but I'm just trying to say that I think there's pros and cons to raising capital. And one of the pros of not raising is that you can make decisions that may be like a further horizon out than a typical investor would be okay with. And I will use an example. So one example would be discounting. So we wanted to build a non-discounting brand, and we eventually did move to a discounting brand once we got involved with private equity. But it gave us an advantage because we were able to keep our prices low and then advertise the fact that we don't artificially inflate our pricing to account for the margin loss of, or the net revenue loss of an actual discount. So we built trust and confidence in our customers to avoid that seasonality and to have a more consistently run business. So that is an example that I think we wouldn't have really been able to maintain because the effects and the revenue and the second order revenue was like further out than what maybe an investor would have wanted.
But it's your patients that controlled this, not theirs.
Exactly.
Yeah. I do want to get to the merger, but there's another piece of your answer to the previous question that I wanted to pick up on that intrigues me, and it was your statement about the importance of competitors. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about that a little bit? Sure.
So when we started, we did the test. And we had to figure a lot of things out. How do you do returns? How do you do the shipping? Like we had to figure out how to compress the mattress, which involved a mattress bag, a shop vac, lots of tape, and a wooden dowel, and a lot of manual labor, which then was a trash compactor that we retrofitted a metal crusher, which then we eventually upgraded to add heating elements to seal the bag, and then contracting with an engineering company to build an automated machine that now is being used by many mattress companies. So yeah, we. Would you remind me what the question was again? I'm like falling back into this visceral moment of like. You had talked about how important it was for your business to have competitors. Yes. So anyways, in that time period when we're like going through all this, we're figuring it all out, which really removed those barriers to entry. So it was very difficult to start. It was very difficult to convince a manufacturer or supplier, like let's say the fabric suppliers, to do a deal with us, especially with like minimum order quantities being astronomical, and we're bootstrapped. We only have $6,000 in the bank account, so how do we get around these? So it was very challenging, and we eventually removed those barriers and also created an excitement from these manufacturers hoping to find another Tuft Needle, which made it really easy for our competition to enter the market. But we had heard at this point when we were like getting this trash compactor and figuring out how to do returns, and we were starting to scale and getting some buzz and PR, that there was a competitor coming and that we needed to get together, like get our shit together, really. And we were advised. Bleep. Sorry, I'm sorry. But not all. We can do that on the recording. Okay. Sorry. We were told that we needed to. A weakness of ours was PR. And a weakness of ours was branding and marketing, like the branding side, and that there was a competitor coming that was their strengths. And so we scrambled to find advisors to help us, because we came from technology, and the tech world is not about branding. I think that some of these tech companies that we all know of have developed really great brands over time and figured it out. But most of them haven't, and they sort of just serendipitously have organically built brands. But we had to start building a brand and a name for ourselves and credibility and all of that stuff really from the beginning. So this was something that was causing a rush and a scramble. It was a blessing in disguise because we did figure those things out. But when our first competitor started and we see these big numbers of funding, we knew that this was going to change the dynamics of how we're marketing and growing our business. And we had this fear that every time they would raise another round, and I'm thinking of one company in particular that started, was our first competitor, that by their second year they had raised over 50 million, and we had raised none. And they were leveraging the fact that they had this war chest to take over the marketing. So our question was, can we even maintain like this cost of acquisition, the acquisition cost of our advertising? Are they going to drive our costs up so that it was no longer a feasible business, through loss leading? And what we found was, it was emotionally a struggle because there was also a lot of copying happening, and it was like our attorneys are like, yes, they are copying, yes, we could go after them, but would this be a distraction? And I learned as an entrepreneur that you can't rely on intellectual property. You can't always rely on barriers. You need to rely on speed. And also to spend the time, it forced us to think about how they were running their business and how we could run it in a different way that they maybe had no interest in running it. And so as an example, they had all of this money. One of their strengths was their ability to advertise and bring awareness to the fact that you can buy a mattress online and it comes in a box. And mattress companies are cool, and it's sort of like building an excitement around trying out new brands. And so we found that if they're going to spend all that money, as long as we make sure that the customer finds us along their journey, that part of their dollars that they spend would be our dollars. And I actually did a back of napkin calculation, and I estimated that somewhere around 30% of every dollar that they were spending was our money. So if they spend $1 million in a month, that's $300,000 that we just spent. And so we saw this correlation with their growth and our growth. And so that essentially helped us to accelerate our growth trajectory by having competition. And now when I look at it, as an entrepreneur early, like when I was in school, I would think to myself, well, somebody else has already thought it, like I'm starting on an idea, somebody else comes out with it, and it's like, somebody's already done it. Now I view it as a validation that I'm onto something and that there's always room. So we've had competitors come in. One of them, as an example, is Purple. They came in, I think, on the third. We were out for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. They're massive, and they got to study how it was all done and to find how they can slide in and differentiate themselves. So I view it as like almost like a collaboration, in a sense. Whether you view it as you're collaborating with competition or not, if you view it from this standpoint, then it changed my perspective to think of it like we're all solving this problem together. We're all, in a way, we're indirectly actually can help each other. What is it that I can do that they're not doing that caters to a customer problem so that I can stand side by side with the competitor, and then we're both advertising and leveraging each other to, back to the cliche, which I didn't understand when I was a younger entrepreneur, which is a rising tide lifts all boats. That's literally what happened. And so now when I advise, I actually think spurring and spawning competition is critical if you want to grow fast.
And this is a kind of a new take on something that economists call an agglomeration externality. We usually think about it in terms of location, that firms like in the auto industry locate in Detroit and the surrounding area and so on.
Okay.
But here you're talking about locating on the web.
Exactly.
And you benefit from the fact that there are other companies out there advertising.
I've heard of it called gas station theory, where like a gas station moves across the street from another and you think they're going to steal, but what happens is it drives more people to those gas stations in general. And that was our experience. And really online it's like a corner in a town that is in everyone's town. So it's digital property that's available everywhere. So I think that's, that makes a lot of sense.
Interesting. Well, so this question comes from the audience, but it also comes from us, and that's, can you talk about the merger and why it was a merger and not something else, and how you got to that point?
So what had happened was it took about 2 years, and this is something we were very patient about that I think investors might not have allowed us to do. We had this idea that if we could figure out out-of-home advertising profitably.
I'm sorry, out of what?
Out of home.
Oh, okay.
So like billboard, radio, television, print, in addition to digital advertising. If we could figure out how to scale that profitably, it would be a competitive advantage because we knew our competition was advertising at a loss. But if we could figure out how to advertise at a win, we could scale this up nationally. And so in Phoenix, it took about 2 years, but we figured out how to essentially do a full city takeover with billboard, radio, and television, and to blend that with our digital strategy so that a commuter is commuting to a job, sees an ad on a billboard, hears it when they're commuting, they hear it on like their podcast or their local talking head that they listen to, and then when they hop on Facebook, they see an ad, and we know because we can target. We can build demos, demographics digitally of people who have professional jobs and commute on the highway. They'll probably see our billboard, et cetera. It took a while to build this model, but it also integrated brick and mortar. So, and after the 2 years, we have our data science team, like literally wizards, helped us dial this in. But we figured out how to be able to measure this profitably and to attribute the spend. So what this means is we could go into a city, assuming certain criteria were met, such as what the average advertising costs are of certain channels like billboard or radio. Assuming the advertising costs are at a certain level, we could go in and fully take over their billboard, radio, television, digital, and measure it blended, and then lift our growth in that center. And if you were to draw a concentric circle in the center zip codes range of a city and then draw concentric circles outward, we were actually able to measure that we would be able to outgrow our national growth rate locally and then also profitably, accretively. The challenge with this, though, was it was about a 6 to 9 month payback, which is really fast. But for us being, we might be doing over 100 million at that time in sales, we're still cash poor. And it doesn't really take a lot for us, too many mistakes, to go bankrupt. And we didn't have a war chest to lean on. We had no assets, so we didn't have any lines of credit. We had no VC capital, so we kind of slipped in this middle ground where VCs were no longer interested in us, except for PE, and banks weren't interested in helping us out because we're still new. So we really were like riding on the edge, which was thrilling and also very stressful. But anyways, so what we found was we could go into a city and then do this takeover. It takes about 6 months. We drop in a store, and it was amazing, and it lifted the online sales of those regions as well. And so we had calculated if we had raised about $25 million, instead of doing 1 to 2 stores in parallel, we could do probably 5 to 10 stores in parallel and really take advantage of this discovery that we made to corner the brick and mortar market. Because yes, we started online. Yes, I viewed brick and mortar is going to phase out over time, but that might take 15 or 20 years. And in the meantime, there's brick and mortar sales. I mean, we calculated about 80 to 90% of all sales are still brick and mortar. So why not build for that, knowing eventually it'll phase out in the future, and be an omni-channel brand and be agnostic to whatever channel and not be dogmatic about being online only. So the $25 million was how much we were going to need to accelerate this process. So word got out, and VC started talking to us, private equity started talking to us, then competitors started talking to us, competitors that you may know. And then manufacturers. We had this like Chinese billionaire from China who was a massive manufacturer who let us name our price. There was a really interesting option. So we ended up going from, we just wanted to raise 25 million, stay bootstrapped, other than the fact that we're going to raise some capital to accelerate this new model that we had built, marketing model. And then what ends up happening is we're getting buyout offers from huge online retailers and even brick and mortar retailers that everyone knows, and competitors offering merger concepts. And it was difficult because there were so many options now, and we wanted to make sure that it was not going to sacrifice our mission, which was to make this industry customer first. And also that it wouldn't sacrifice the brand. So we're not going to go into a typical acquisition where we're shoved into a corner and then it fades away into the darkness. We wanted to, whatever deal we're going to do is going to be the best thing for the customer, best thing for our employees, and the best thing for really the mission overall. So we ended up with 4 options. One was a big financial institution who offered us exactly what we wanted, 25 million with 25 secondary for some employees wanted some money off the table. Another was, there were actually 2 full buyout options, which were going to be the typical acquisition shoved into the corner. And another option was this concept of a merger. And we had agreed that we would listen and meet even with what we might have marked as enemies or frenemies or co-opetition. And we'll just hear them out. And we actually had a really good conversation with the private equity firm Advent, who owns Serta Simmons, and found that they had a similar point of view of the future, and they got it, they understood. And the executive team at Serta, for the most part, were not from the mattress industry. They were outsiders who were brought in. So that also gave us confidence. But this idea that the original disruptor merges with the largest manufacturer is this disruption story, and with this goal where our team, or sort of our point of view, is like we're pirates raiding the ship. If they're going to give us the control, the co-founders and also the team members, to literally make Serta Simmons Beautyrest like Tuft Needle, we could get to this mission by disrupting from within at scale. So rather than having to grow Tuft Needle to the billion or whatever, to be this influence, we need to be the number 1, 2, or 3, because the leaders really set the standards that others follow. If Apple sets up a new form factor, Samsung generally needs to follow, especially the smaller ones that we don't hear about. And then if Samsung changes a form factor or a feature, it creates white space, and Apple sort of follows. And so we were wanting to be a number 1 or 2 or 3 so that we could really have a lasting change. But by going inside, sort of raiding that ship, if we could build Serta Simmons and Beautyrest brands like Tuft Needle, we could essentially accomplish our mission. They're already multi-billion in revenue. They're already fully adopted as a household name. They have the skeleton key for brick and mortar distribution. They have the key to Lowe's or to Sam's Club and Costco, which is unbelievable for a lot of brands. They have the key to every retailer for the most part. And so that was one aspect that was very romantic. And then the other aspect was they have the funding, they have the skeleton key to unlock everything, and they also have a manufacturing network that might be able to help us cut our costs. And so between the war chest they have, the manufacturing, and then the distribution, we can scale Tuft Needle to this leading brand that we wanted it to always be, and they could help us with that. And so that was really the reason why we made this decision, and we liked it. It wasn't necessarily the most lucrative deal for the founders and the team, but we felt it was one of the better options. It was really that, the financial institution, the 50 million, which we were facing some disruption ourselves with imports. So that was a risk, and bootstrapping we could have continued to do. And now in hindsight, we definitely could have continued to bootstrap.
So I think I've counted that we've actually addressed 3 questions, which is very cool. But I do want to ask this question from the audience. But I think I might editorialize about the question. The question that came in is, how did the culture of your company change with the merger with Serta? But I think what you probably are going to tell us is about how you changed the culture of Serta as opposed to how Serta changed you. But
yeah,
pick whichever side of that question you want.
So the goal of Advent to the founders, and I feel comfortable sharing this, was 1, continue growing Tuft Needle without sacrificing that growth. 2, help us fix these brands and make them like Tuft Needle, because they had a lot of quantity, a lot of size, but not quality, and no customer relationship. Like, we have like a cult-like following. We have the highest net promoter score in the industry, and we're a viral brand just without necessarily even the need of marketing. And how do we create this customer loyalty, this quality within these brands? So anyways, that was our second goal, was to fix their brands. And the third goal was to not sacrifice the culture, which from one aspect is like, is that just something we're being told, or is that something they really want? But as we got in, it was something that they wanted. And really what I found is, and what we've helped them do is to help transition their competencies. Because you have a lot of people in the company when we first did this merger that were primarily CPG, which is challenging because you need to build a relationship directly with the customer. And you need to do marketing that's like actionable marketing, lead, not just like awareness. Like, you need to actually convert and measure conversions, which is not a competency of CPG.
I'm sorry.
Consumer products, goods, and like that. And then also, you have a lot of people with the competencies of manufacturing. And what we learned is having this feedback loop with the customers is like the core competency you start with, which is you make a product, you ask how it went, you observe how it went, and you make something better. And you use the same process also, you integrate this with your marketing. So what had happened was we definitely had an old guard, like employees who were seeing changes happening. You're finding synergies, and there's duplicate teams, and we had to like reconcile. Is it the Serta Simmons team that does this? Like, is it accounting, or do we continue doing our accounting? We might do accounting differently than they do, and they could learn some things. And so we sort of had to decide which teams we're going to keep separate for a while to figure out which ones we were going to replace. And as some of these changes happened, we did lose a lot of talent, as expected, but it held out for a long time. And I think a big part of that was that I stayed around and was confident in the future. But even though our company changed and it's no longer the magic it used to be, it's actually not true. If like new people who join are like, this is the best job I've ever had. So I really think for the people that were there, there's a bias towards, the parties we used to have and like the retreats we used to go on, and, having beer on draft in the office, and then like the changes that we needed to make to be like, to abide by some of the rules and things that maybe investors or shareholders have, or HR and whatever, that we hadn't had to go through yet because we weren't that size yet. But overall, the culture did change, but it didn't totally become like Serta. And there definitely was an osmosis where we did end up becoming a little bit more corporate, and we started to lose speed, which is very frustrating for me. But also, they started to pick up speed, and it also helped them recruit. Tuft Needle was epic for recruiting, and just recently, our CEO that we helped them recruit a new CEO, and that now is the CEO was just announced last week of Serta Simmons, and I'm 100% certain we would not have been able to hire talent of her caliber for Serta Simmons, even though it was a multi-billion-dollar company. No way. Tuft Needle could be a few hundred million, far more exciting for an executive than like a stodgy company that's like shrinking or is more of a cash cow, versus something that's exciting and growing and changing and disrupting that could be the next big thing. And so it really helped them also recruit, which helped them turn over a lot of their talent and really build out some of these new competencies that they needed in the new world that they were having to configure their business to be.
So when you said that you lost talent, was that from the old sort of Simmons group, or was it from the Tuft Needle?
I would say primarily Tuft Needle. So what it did as far as their team, it allowed them to start to bring in those competencies, either by having us take those competencies over, or giving them the luster to attract talent that they need that otherwise wouldn't join them, which then created the position where they felt confident to maybe let some people go into, which I think was better for them and better for the business. So it enabled them to bring in the talent that they needed that was very challenging to attract. And then we also were an accelerator. We were like a speed ramp for them because we already had a lot of these competencies that they could send to us. So digital marketing, turnkey. We immediately built that out. Product development, 6,000 SKUs. As they're trying to figure out how to change that through their relationships, we redesigned what would Serta look like if it had 3 SKUs, or Beauty Rest, or Simmons. Let's launch that greenfield online, and we know how to do that. And it took us a few months versus their previous attempt, which took several years and was a flop. So there was a number of things that we were able to do. But yeah, we did lose some key talent that I do miss, but we were also able to start attracting still very good talent that may be better suited for the phase the company's at, which is another thing I learned as an entrepreneur, is that some people are just better suited for a certain range, and you need to find somebody who knows how to take a company from this range to that range.
Interesting. We might have time for one last question.
Okay.
Advice for the students in the audience.
Just generally?
Yeah.
I honestly, and I know this is part of the curriculum, especially in the entrepreneurship major here, but really starting with a problem that you've experienced was huge for me. So that's one, I would say. Another is, I was really quick to give up when I would see competition start something that I think was exactly my idea. I really matured and realized how important it is to have competition to help accelerate the growth. And I really also would say to build prototypes and test, because I think that there is I think it's a common fear that a lot of people have, which is sort of the analysis through paralysis. I didn't want to keep working on my business plan. But like getting to the point where you are in front of a customer to have somebody validate with their dollars is so important to begin building your feedback. And you can fall into this trap of, not actually making a product or a fake product, which is what we did, and getting it in front of people and getting to the point where you can start this feedback loop where you get feedback and you can make tweaks and iteration. I think that's really important. I think the last thing, and I think advice is hard. I'm just sharing what I learned and it was helpful for me. That I was like very dogmatic about this. I used to believe that the best product wins and that cream rises to the top over time. And I no longer.
VHS machine, huh?
Say that again?
You never had a VHS machine?
No, my parents did, but yeah, exactly. And what I learned is that the best marketer wins. And if you have the best product, that just helps make your brand that much more sticky, which helps reduce your cost of marketing. And I've seen this over and over. There are companies that maybe start with the best product, which helps their marketing, or you're viral, you don't need to market. Google's an example of that. But I was so engrossed in the product and believing that the product was really what mattered the most, and learned very quickly that whoever can communicate their product better actually is who wins. And so if you can do both, that is the most ideal. So marketing from the beginning is a really important competency that any of my future ventures will absolutely have from the beginning.
Well, that's a terrific place to end. We are in Smeal working very hard on our own marketing and in a brand new campaign that we've just rolled out in the last month or so. So we've got a lot more things to do, but we're very excited about it. So great vote of confidence from you. Let's thank JT.